Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 15th edition of the regular city council meeting. I know you have anticipated this for over a week, and I'd just like to ask everybody if you're warming to this temperature. Okay, enough. No more humor. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Dennehy, absent. Councilmember Maloney,
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer,
Here.
Councilmember Stein,
Here.
Councilmember Tracy, absent. Councilmember Worthington,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick,
Here.
Mayor Troutman.
Here. Thank you all. I'd like to invite Nelson Hoover to the podium from Skyline Mennonite Church for our invocation. Would you please rise?
Thank you. It's an honor to offer the invocation and a blessing on your meeting tonight. So I'm going to, as I prayed for you all for this meeting and each of you this evening, wrote a few things down. So I'm going to read those. Would you just take a moment with me? Father, you've commanded us to pray for our leaders in government positions, so we're doing just that right now. I lift them up to you. First of all, I thank you for these men and women, their willingness to serve in this capacity. I ask you to bless the work of their hands and minds, and in any areas of their lives that they've had to sacrifice to serve in this capacity, would you bless that? I pray that each of them could see the agenda items this evening with clarity, and that they would bring to the table the perspective that you've given to them without hidden agenda. I ask you to give them wisdom from above for the topics to be discussed this evening. I pray that decisions would be made for the good of the people that they lead, and that there would be justice and equality in every decision. Father, bless them. May your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Pledge of allegiance.
God bless you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, thank you all. Thank you, Nelson. Is there anyone that has written to speak to council? Okay, thank you. Are there any council members with comments or announcements? Is it plugged in?
May not be plugged in. There we go. Nope. Ha.
Oh, I thought maybe we got our electric shut off already.
Probably just mine.
Probably not a good joke, is it?
There we go.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Emily was not able to be here tonight, but I would like to remind everybody there's a CAG meeting tomorrow at 3. I believe that's at the PCC campus. And just for council, kind of an FYI, I had someone call me from Pueblo, and the Pueblo City Council is looking at establishing a shopping cart ordinance. And it was pretty interesting the way it was described to me, which I've not independently verified, so excuse me for that. But what I was told was that they are biting essentially both sides of the coin, that they plan to fine stores that lose their carts, and they plan to fine people who illegitimately have a cart. So I think that maybe this is kind of a pat on our own back. I think we avoided all those pitfalls in our ordinance, but I just thought I would pass that on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Anyone else? I would like to announce that I am going to have coffee with the mayor at the Fine Arts Society building, the old post office, on the 25th of this month at 8:30 in the morning. So it's always a really stirring, humorous time to spend with the mayor. Okay. Anyone else? That's it. Then I would like to invite our HR director, Butch, to come forward with their recognition. Thank you.
Good evening, distinguished members of the dais. As I've said before, the second council meeting of the month is always my favorite because we get to recognize our employees who are realizing a milestone in their career with the city. We had 2 individuals scheduled for recognition this evening. Unfortunately, I've learned one of those will not be able to join us, so we'll reschedule them for next month. But we do have one of the individuals to recognize, and this is kind of bittersweet because not only will we be recognizing them this evening for a milestone with the city, but we'll be losing him at the end of the month to retirement. So at this time, I would like to invite Tammy, and Mary Pat and Lori up. Lori Leslie we're being recognized for 5 years of employment with the City of Canyon City. On July 22nd, 2019, Lori was hired as an accounting technician to do our accounts payable, a position she has held since then and has become our custom. I'll allow her supervisor and her director to say some really good things about Lori, which I'm sure they can do because I work with her quite frequently.
Good evening, Mayor Troutman and City Council. I'm Mary Pat, Lori's supervisor, and I've worked with Lori for 2.5 years now. And I can't tell you how great it is coming into a new position where one of your responsibilities is to supervise an area and you find that the person doing that job is awesome. Lori does such a great job with all the different aspects of her job as AP Tech, from making sure that our vendors get paid on time, to creating the list of bills and P-card list of bills for City Council, to communicating regularly with vendors and fellow employees. And that's just a fraction of what she does. She does all of this without ever missing a deadline and without ever losing her cool. I've been really lucky to get to know Lori on a more personal level. We share a love of quilting and machine embroidery, and I'm a rank amateur compared to Lori, and she's always giving me advice on how to improve my skills. I count myself lucky to call Lori my friend, and I'm really gonna miss her when she retires in a few weeks. Thanks for everything that you do, Lori.
So I'd like to second some of the things that Mary Pat said. Lori started a few months after I did. She was one of the first hires that I was able to do in my department, so that was kind of good that we actually got to bring somebody in. It was rocky at first. She wasn't sure she wanted to stay with us, but she trusted that we would get through everything, and now here we are 5 years later, and she's going to leave us. She's going to retire in a couple of weeks, but it's well-deserved retirement coming up for her. I never did any machine embroidery until Lori kind of got me hooked on it. So although she always looks at ways to help save the city money and make sure we're spending our money right there, she loves to get her co-workers involved in spending their money on the outside in other projects. So it's been a pleasure to have Lori on our staff, and she will definitely be missed. Congratulations.
So, Lori, here's your certificate and your pin. You can wear this even after you retire.
I'll do that.
And as has also become our custom, I would ask that council come down in front of the dais, and Lori, you join them for a picture.
May not get in a department picture, but you'll be in this one.
And it'll be in the newsletter. I think the city administrator is calling you. I think he called you by name. Hey, you, and you too. Thank you.
That is always fun, and we're going to go ahead and waive the 20-minute speech that Lori generally would have to give. She didn't hear that, supposedly, so. Okay, moving right along, I'd like to ask the city administrator to review the agenda and the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 8A is to approve the minutes for the city council meeting on July 1st, special meeting on June 25th and June 26th. 8B authorizes the city administrator to sign a water service contract for 322 Grape Creek Drive. 8C authorizes the city administrator to sign a national opioid settlement with Kroger. 8D awards bid 46-24 to a Pear Avenue reconstruction project to Avalanche Excavating in an amount not to exceed $2,581,170.06. 8E awards bid 5124 repair of 2024 Silverado 3500 to Zimmerman's Auto Body Shop in an amount not to exceed $22,287.36. 8F authorizes the ratification of a payment to TNA Customs Body Shop for the amount of $7,743.75. 8G is to receive and file monthly budget summary, and 8H is to receive and file cash disbursements and P-card disbursements.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Are there any discussions? Anybody in council would like to ask our administrator any questions on that? I don't see a yellow hand there. I just had, I read through the National Opioid Settlement, Kroger. There was, is there a monetary amount? Is this just something absolving them from us entering into a lawsuit against them?
There is a monetary amount. They have an online spreadsheet that breaks it down by municipality, and I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I want to say it's in the $7,000 to $10,000 a year range.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Any other questions of council? Hearing none and seeing none, I would then entertain a motion and a second. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, I move that we approve the agenda and consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I think that was pretty close to a tie. We're going to give that to Andrea. Thank you, welcome. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Maloney,
Aye.
Councilmember Schmisher,
Aye.
Councilmember Stein,
Aye.
Councilmember Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. At this time, then, I would ask the administrator for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have the written report in your packet. A couple of highlights there. The New Method Laundry demolition has received environmental clearance. There was a pre-demo meeting today, so that is getting closer. We have the permits in hand, so it's a matter of the contractor mobilizing and getting to work. So that will be starting here soon. We are also working, we have staff and Councilmember Schmisher and Worthington working on selecting a consultant to assist us with the putting together an RFP for the operation of the Royal Gorge Bridge. For those that don't know, the bridge contract with our current operator expires in October of 2026, so we are preparing for the potential for an RFP, and we do anticipate that the current operator will bid on that as well. That's we're taking several steps there. And then just before this meeting, Councilmember Worthington asked me where we are with the Black Hills property purchase. I do anticipate that we will have a purchase and sale agreement coming to the next city council meeting, the first meeting in August.
Okay.
Happy
Thank-
to take any questions.
Any questions of council? Okay, thank you. Well, this time then, I'd like to open a public hearing, and the public hearing is as such, introduction, the first reading of ordinance, let me get my glasses here. Okay. An ordinance 3, Series 2024, entitled, An Ordinance of the City of Canyon City amending Title 17 of the Canyon City Municipal Code concerning street side setbacks in the general commercial district, solar as a principal use, fence height, fence height in side yards and signage. I would invite Patrick to, our city planner, if he would, to give us a report.
Certainly. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. If we could just wait my PowerPoint to be pulled up on screen. There we are. So, as the agenda item has said, this evening we are here to consider what is the fourth of a series of omnibus amendments to our Unified Development Code. After the code was adopted in 2021, we did 2 amendments in calendar year 2022, 1 amendment last year in 2023. This is the 4th such amendment, and it is being titled Ordinance 3, Series of 2024. The city currently requires a maximum street side setback in the GC General Commercial District of 25 feet. During the processing of the site plan for the new Arby's restaurant at 1004 Royal Gorge Boulevard, it was discovered that this maximum street side allowance makes programming a site where parking and a drive-through lane will be necessary impossible to comply with. The Arby's site plan went before the Board of Adjustment for a variance to this maximum setback in October of 2023. That variance request was granted. In granting the applicant's variance request, the Board of Adjustment noted that the recent pattern of redevelopment along Royal Gorge Boulevard, principally between 1st and 15th Street, has included restaurants with drive-through lanes, and therefore also recommended that the UDC be eliminated to eliminate this requirement. That would include the Starbucks, it would include the Dairy Queen restaurant, and if you look at the format, even though these weren't part of a redevelopment effort at the time under the current code, it would also include Wendy's and Taco Bell in that same district. The first proposed amendment to Ordinance 3, Series of 2024, would be a removal of a maximum street side setback in the GC General Commercial Zone to accommodate this. The second proposed amendment, although Canyon City does allow ground-mounted solar arrays as an accessory use in the Unified Development Code, it was discovered during a recent inquiry from an energy service provider that our code does not allow ground-mounted solar arrays as a principal use of a property in any zone district citywide. Now, this is in contradiction to the fact that in 2019, the city did process a solar array as a principal use of a property located on either side of the South Street right-of-way, west of Field Avenue in the north-central part of the city. And by all accounts, this has not proven to be a particularly problematic use at this location. Very quiet, does not generate much traffic. We have not received any complaints about it in the 5 years that it's been operating. Consequently, Ordinance 3 proposes to add ground-mounted solar energy collection systems as a principal use of property, but it is proposed to come with some limitations. Firstly, the changes are proposed to provide a pathway for ground-mounted solar as a principal use of a property. In Table 1703-040B, pertaining to residential zone districts only, under the category Utility Infrastructure and Energy-Related Uses, a new use is added, Solar Energy Collection Systems ground-mounted. It is then allowed in all residential zone districts as a conditional use. This means that there is still a public process that would allow neighbors to be informed of a pending application where they could evaluate the materials and express any concerns that they have. Now, in Table 1703-040C, which pertains to non-residential uses, the first thing we have to do is actually create a category for utility infrastructure and related uses. One does not currently exist in the code right now at all. The 3 existing utility-related use types that are currently placed under vehicle-related uses would then be moved into the new utility infrastructure and related uses category, which you see there. Solar energy collection systems ground-mounted is then added as a use type in non-residential zone districts. It is then designated as permitted in the I industrial district, a conditional use in the BP Business Park and OPR Open Space Parks and Recreation District, and a special review use in the NC Neighborhood Commercial District and GC General Commercial District. It is not permitted at all in the CB Central Business District, and the reason for this is primarily that it is staff's goal to avoid having these uses eat up available commercially zoned land that could otherwise be generating sales tax and creating jobs. So there is a process in place to evaluate very carefully these requests when we receive them.
Okay, Patrick, would you like to ask Patrick a question right now?
Are you open to questions, or you want us to save
Should
them
we
for
wait
the
till
end?
you,
If you'd like to ask a question now, I'll see what I can do to answer it.
Okay, so my question is about what the definition of solar energy collection systems ground mounted is. Do we have a definition for that, Patrick?
There is a definition for ground-mounted solar array. It does not specify principal versus accessory use, but there is a definition in the code for ground-mounted solar array. And there are also some special provisions contained in 1705130A when it comes to use-specific conditions that any ground-mounted solar array would have to comply with. That would include height limits, that would include clearance above the ground, it would include setbacks, et cetera.
Okay, my specific question is, would solar batteries, batteries designed to store the solar energy generated, fit within that definition?
I believe it would. I would have to revisit the exact wording of the definition of ground-mounted solar array. I don't know how a ground-mounted solar array would potentially operate without some sort of a battery storage system.
Well, the one that we did permit is, feeds its energy directly into the grid. There's no battery storage associated with it. The issue, the county has established a moratorium on solar battery installations within the county. And that's why I asked the question, because there's some question about what you do with solar batteries after their useful life, how they're treated. There's the possibility of fire with those batteries, and there are several questions that probably need to be answered more fully that have not been answered in the general industry as I understand it.
And I would have to apologize. I do not know if our definition for ground-mounted solar includes any reference to battery storage with that.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, it does not, so it would only be the panels.
Only the panels?
Right.
Okay, so it would not permit a battery storage
It
facility?
would not cover a BESS system, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you.
So finally, in Table 1703, 040B for residential and C for non-residential uses, again, these designations would come into play, as well as the use standards that are defined in 1705-130A. The third proposal, or the third proposed change to Title 17, would involve fences in residential areas. Specifically, fences installed on residential properties with two street frontages. If the homeowner wants a fence on the secondary street side to be considered 6 feet tall, as currently written, it must be set back a total of 10 feet from the street side right-of-way. It has been observed that this 10-foot separation creates a maintenance gap, where effectively, because it's on the outside of the fence, it's forgotten about, not generally cared about. This makes it a potential code enforcement issue in the future. Thus, the proposed third change to the UDC would remove the 10-foot separation requirement as specified in Section 1705-130A. A fence could be placed at the edge of the right-of-way, which is where the lot line is measured from. However, the height of the fence can only be 6 feet once the fence has reached 25 feet back from the front of the property. That would be the primary street, as measured from the primary street. Forward of this 25-foot setback, the fence must be at least at or less than 4 feet, and it must be 50% transparent. So the 25-foot point is the transition where it can go from 4 feet up to 6 feet. And finally, the fourth proposed amendment to the UDC makes changes to Chapter 1707, which is our sign code. Council may recall that in the summer of 2023, the state of emergency that was put in place during the COVID pandemic was lifted. Upon this repeal, staff was directed to recommence enforcement of the sign code, which had been deliberately left lax during the pandemic. The first item staff acted upon under the recommencement of sign enforcements were feather flag signs, which are prohibited in the CB Central Business District. This, as you will recall, created something of a backlash among merchants along Main Street who were using feather flags, and council declared a moratorium on enforcement until an agreement with the merchants could be achieved. Negotiations regarding the sign code have occupied most of the last year. The 9 proposed modifications to the sign code are what ultimately have been agreed between the downtown merchants and representatives of the city. And before I go any further with the presentation, let me also draw your attention to an addendum sheet, which should be at your seat. This is some language modifications that we have recommended for clarification's sake. And there is a proposed motion that would incorporate those in with your motion on this particular ordinance. So let me start with the first of the modifications to the sign code amends section 1707-050E. This increases the area allowance for projecting signs, sometimes referred to as blade signs, from 6 square feet to 12 square feet. The next section, 1707-050F, is amended to increase the area allowance for awning or canopy signs. Currently, such signs can cover 50% of the surface area of an awning or canopy. This amendment increases that allowance to 75%. Section 1707-050G is also amended to increase the maximum area for permanent window signs. Currently, 25% of the window surface is allowed by signage, by sign permit. This amends the maximum area to an allowance of 50% of the window plane. Next, section 1707-060A, which governs display periods for temporary sign types, is amended so that temporary signs in Chapter 1707 have the same duration and period as temporary signs in the riverfront zoning section of the code, which is 17.04. That is, 5 periods of display per calendar year, with each period lasting 14 days, or a total of 70 days per calendar year. To clarify that from the way it was drafted originally in the ordinance, we've added some additional language on the addendum before you this evening. Feather flag signs, which are regulated in 1707-060D, have additional requirements imposed upon them. They can only be displayed during business hours. They have to be taken in when the business closes. They must be located within 15 feet of the entrance to a storefront or located on the same lot. They must be placed within an amenity zone or in such a way as to ensure a minimum pedestrian clearance zone of 48 inches in the sidewalk. They cannot be placed within 2 feet of the face of a curb. That's the curb overhang for a vehicle. They cannot be placed so as to impede vision triangles at intersections, and they cannot be illuminated. A-frame or sandwich board signs, which are regulated in 1707-060E4D, are amended to require such signs shall also be located in an amenity zone. A new section of temporary sign is also being created, flag signs, as regulated in the new section 1707-060I, and will have these requirements. They cannot exceed 12 square feet, which is a standard 4 by 3 foot flag. They cannot protrude above the roof line of a building. One flag is permitted per 12 feet of linear frontage along the street. Flags must be secured to the building and maintain a clearance zone below them of at least 7 feet. They cannot project more than 3 feet from the building facade. And finally, Chapter 1713, the definitions section of the UDC, is amended to create definitions for amenity zone and flags. Now, with that, per the notice requirements to text amendments for Title 17 as specified in Table 1710-030C3D, This hearing has been advertised with a public notice on the city's website for at least 15 days prior to hearings before Planning Commission and City Council. As of today, staff has received no mail or phone calls concerning these proposed amendments. We have received email correspondence from residents in the 300 block of Macon Avenue requesting modifications concerning feather flags. Those modifications are encapsulated in the language that's included with the addendum before you this evening. And so with that, staff and the Planning Commission, which conducted their public hearing on this the evening of June 26th, recommend that City Council approve the draft ordinance for Ordinance 3, Series of 2024, making 4 categorical modifications to Title 17, and set the second reading for August 1st, or I'm sorry, August 5th. That would conclude the staff presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Patrick. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Patrick, would you go back to the awning slide, please? Great. So my question is, the area of coverage that it's currently 25% and we're now going to 50%. How is that measured from the code enforcement perspective?
So what the applicant would need to do in terms of permitting this would be to give us dimensions for either the canopy or the awning. From that, we would derive the 50%, I'm sorry, 75% area of that. So it could be the side, it could be the front, it could be on top of, but yeah, that would go to 75% of what they show us is the available area of the structure.
So actually my question was specific to windows, sorry about that. So they would just block out, the sign is going to be within these limits on the window and demonstrate then by measurement or calculation that it meets the.
They would tell us the square footage of the surface and the square footage of the sign. We obviously don't regulate content. We just make sure that the area meets code.
Okay. So for in the window that we're looking there, it says large shop window mock-up, I believe. So the question is, how much of the blank area is included in the measurement? Or if I applied for such a sign in my window, say I had a business on Main Street, I would just block out the area where the letters were, and that would be sufficient to demonstrate that.
So what you would need to do is show us the square footage of the window, the window surface, okay?
Yeah.
And then whatever that 50% equates to in terms of area, you would need to show me a sign where you are at or below that 50%.
Thank you. Well, for Windows 50.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ryan?
I just wanted to alert you that Councilmember Schmischer has her hand up.
That's why? Oh, I didn't say yellow hand. Amy, go right ahead.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Mayor Troutman and Administrator Stevens. Thanks as well for that wonderful presentation, Patrick. I have a question on the third proposed amendment and a couple of comments and questions on the fourth proposed amendment. I'll start with the fourth since that's the one that we're currently on. First, thank you so much for the time and effort that the city and city staff have taken to meet with Central Business District business owners and kind of the collaboration that's gone on for the past many months. I wanted to also thank you for the amendments that you've proposed to meet some of the concerns with regard to the language of how the number of consecutive days in a row would be addressed, meaning that businesses can have feather flags for more than 14 days at a time, but that is the maximum amount for one of the periods. So I appreciate that clarification in the text. I also wanted to ask, one of the Central Business District owners' primary concerns, as they expressed to us in the many meetings that we've had about this, was the fact that that additional folks come into their businesses when feather flags are out. And the city had proposed numerous different ways that the city staff intended to ensure that downtown businesses were promoted. And those owners who engaged in those conversations had identified two priorities from their perspective. One being banners downtown that identified kind of by block and businesses, and then the second being block directories. During our last meeting, they specifically noted that they'd like to see kind of the timeline and the plan for when those would be coming online, so that they could understand that as feather flags, the use thereof is being transitioned down, these promotional ways of ensuring that foot traffic continues and people continue to come into their doors are kind of ramping up, and that those things are happening simultaneously. So City Administrator Stevens, I'd really appreciate getting that update on where the city staff are with regard to designing and procuring the banners and the block directories. I do have two other questions related to the fourth proposed amendment after that. Thanks.
Sure. As far as the block or the banner signs and the block directories, our economic development manager, Rick Harmon, is working on securing some quotes for that. We may have enough budget this year to start procuring some of the banners. The other aspect that we talked about was a promotional downtown website, and that is something that will probably move forward this year. But as far as the other two items, and I think we said it at the meeting, those are a little bit larger budget items, so we are securing the pricing so it can be put into the 2025 budget, and so we can move forward as soon as possible in 2025 with those. But if we do have funds over for downtown promotion this year, we will make some of those purchases this year if possible.
Would that be something that, if it isn't able to be purchased this year, that the city could plan to make a priority for the first quarter of 2025 to ensure that they are kind of out and ready, certainly before the busier shoulder seasons of spring and then summer?
That is the intent, yes.
Great, glad to hear that. My two other comments and questions related to the fourth proposed amendment. One, I would like to discuss for a moment the definition of flag. I do think it's a little bit confusing as it's currently worded, as it appears to insinuate that the flag would be directly attached to the building, whereas I believe that there would be some sort of attachment that the flag would attach to, and then that would be attached to the building. So just wanted to get Attorney Sellers' thoughts on that. Thanks.
It's my understanding that that was the conversations that were had, and that's the direction we received from staff, that the flag, yes, was intended to be attached to the building and not to a pole to the building. But if the council's preference is to change that, that's fine. It's just a matter of amending that definition. I think that there's concerns in one of the, maybe the Central Business District, about having poles that maybe Patrick could speak to a little bit more.
Well, I think in the Central Business District, because what you have in front of the stores is right-of-way, I don't think we want actual flag poles mounted to the ground. We were trying to describe something that would be attached to the building. Now, we could refine that definition so that it may be broader to include actual ground-mounted flag poles in other zone districts, if council would like. But at this point, for the definition of flags, the example that was rapidly coming to mind were the flags for Boudreaux's in the 200 block of Main Street right now, because they do have a number of flags that they put along the street, and we kind of liked what they were doing with those flags, so we wanted the definition to emulate that.
Yes, to be clear, I'm not suggesting ground poles for flags. It's simply that the definition, as it currently reads, says that the sign made of cloth or lightweight material attachable by one edge to a building the cloth or lightweight material is not what would be attached to the building. So if we could take a look at that definition and perhaps refine it a bit to make it a little bit more clear before the second reading, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, that, we can definitely do that, and we can add that, that language in there to allow a flag pole to come, and I'm assuming to come out from a building with the flag attached is what you're talking about.
Exactly, and defer to city planner Mulready's expertise as to, where and how that should be positioned to ensure that it doesn't impede pedestrian traffic or otherwise. And then my last comment or question with regard to the fourth proposed amendment, part of the conversation that was previously had with the merchants is that obviously business owners have invested in the feather flags that have previously been purchased either during the moratorium or during the time period of emergency for COVID-19. And City Administrator Stevens had noted that, for feather flags that were purchased prior to this new amendment, with regard specifically to the height of the feather flags, many of them are, say 8 feet instead of 6 feet, that those feather flags could continue to be used until they needed to be retired due to wear and tear, rather than folks needing to purchase new feather flags that met that height requirement. Do I have that correct, City Administrator Stevens?
Yes, we will grandfather in the flags that have been purchased until they are no longer suitable due to wear and tear, and we will handle that administratively.
Thank you. I do have one question regarding the third proposed amendment, but I'm happy to stop in case other council members have questions related to the fourth.
I have two, and they're just, in reading over this, I take it that it's okay to have solar panels put in your backyard of your residence.
Yes, that would be an accessory use.
That would be accessory use. And I just was concerned that the 5-foot height, maybe, why wouldn't that be 6 feet, about the size of the maximum height of a fence? And I'm not, I don't see that many of them. I see them coming on board. Most of them are on roofs in my business, but I see a possibility, so I don't know, is that a significant difference that?
I don't know that it's a significant difference. I think what we found was our goal was to have them concealed if they're within a 6-foot fence area, to have them not visible from a nearby street.
Okay, and there's no limitation then, the possibility on coverage as an accessory use, or did I miss something?
Well, the coverage is going to be under zoning, what percentage of a lot can have physical material built on it. That's what would trigger how many arrays you could put on a property.
Okay. And then lastly, and it's not new to any of this, obviously. So I see a lot of Cs and Ps, and when the public looks at this, their eyes are going to roll over. And is there I don't know what C necessarily stands for, or P. I know you're trying to make it easy.
You're only getting a portion of the table. Those tables define, P is a permitted use, meaning there is no application that you have to go through for the city to begin using it. You have the right, you can begin using it from day one when you purchase the property. A C is a conditional use permit, which is a type of discretionary zoning where it's been identified that there may be the potential for land use conflicts, but it does not rise to the point where it may need council action to oversee it. This is an administrative process where neighbors are notified of the application. They have a certain amount of time to come in and take a look at the materials. And to the extent that they have offered reasonable concerns and things that they would like to maybe see cooked into this, we can impose those as conditions on a permit. The higher level of a discretionary use is called a special review use. That's the S. That's the one where you have to go to public hearings before Planning Commission and City Council, and the use, there is no guarantee that the use would be approved. It's up at, Planning Commission and Council's discretion as to whether they would approve the use, but you can certainly impose significant conditions to ensure that any potential land use conflicts would be mitigated before the use actually started.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I felt that after reading through this, I knew what that was. would it be almost embarrassing to put what P stood for and what C stood for?
That is in the tables now. If you go to look at our website and see those charts, those use charts, those are defined in the table now.
So, Ms.
There's a legend and a key above the table that explains what all
Okay,
the
it's just not on the regulation that we're,
Not in the abbreviated ordinance that you got.
and I don't have to root for it. I mean, like I said, we're trying to do this for our residents, make it more easy for them to understand and like us better. And if it's too confusing, that's not going to happen. And I thought, well, I wonder if the table is readily and easily available so they'd understand it.
It is readily and easily available, and this is why we organize things into tables. It is a vast improvement over the code that it replaced.
Because, yeah, I just tell them to call Patrick. I'm just kidding. But, okay, that was my question, so, thank you. But I do wonder about the height of the angle and the height, whether there would be a difference in a panel itself. Do they come in 5 foot or 6 foot increments? Are we going to cause extra expense to someone because they're going to have to cut down a panel? I don't know what a normal size of a solar panel is, but I thought, well, maybe if it was the same height as the fence, it'd be okay. Anyway, that's 6 feet. So. Okay, is there anybody from the public that would like to address us or talk to
Amy
us?
did say she had a-
Oh, I'm sorry. Amy, go right ahead.
Thank you. Apologies. I do have one additional regarding the third proposed amendment with regard to the fence heights. I certainly understand the concern about creating strips of land that aren't being maintained. However, we've also heard from citizens who are concerned about limited fence heights due to deer and due to, dogs. And I would like to know how many lots in Canyon have 2 street frontages. Because if I'm understanding it correctly, homeowners that do have that side street frontage will have their ability to put up new 6-foot side street fences severely constrained by this amendment. Obviously, depending on lot dimensions, but we certainly have a wide variety of those in Canyon. So before this comes back to us for the second reading, I'd like to at least have an estimate with regard to how many lots this would potentially be impacting, given the ongoing concerns that citizens have raised to us about this. Thanks.
We would estimate that it's probably about 25%, looking at, some of our standard city blocks and knowing that we would have 4 corners that would each have, both 2 street frontages. So the estimate would be about 25%.
Okay, then this is something that I can't support, at least without further information and further conversation about it, which I'll certainly reach out and kind of have those conversations with Director Mulready. I don't want to further constrain folks' abilities to have 6-foot fences to be able to properly care for and maintain their dogs and their gardens and other things like that. So, thanks.
I think the 6 foot is except for visual sight corners is allowed.
It's allowed now. All we're doing is
Yeah,
saying.
it's allowed
You
now.
can continue to do it, but that 10-foot strip, that
So now-
separation, we would rather have that on the inside of the fence, inside the yard, than outside the fence. That's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the only change that's being
So the only,
proposed.
the only change being made is to move it out. We've always had the reduced height for visual corners where people have to make a turn and to see.
Director Mulready, do you mind going back to the third proposed amendment? I believe that there is a significant change. Again, happy to have this conversation with you in between first and second reading as well. But from the code as I've read it, it does change it so that there is this 25-foot setback or the house frontage. But if you wouldn't mind going back to the third proposed amendment slide, that would be helpful.
He's
trying-
frantically pushing a button.
I'm trying, yeah.
Understood. So with regard to this change, it's that 25-foot setback that I believe folks would lose.
Well, they lose that now. from 0 to 25 feet going into the lot from the primary street, you are already height limited at 4 feet for your front yard. All this is doing is saying, okay, that transition still occurs at the 25-foot point into the lot. All we're doing is saying, okay, you can now have a 6-foot fence all the way at your side property line, rather than the 10-foot street side setback.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I am not concerned about it and love that folks would get 10 more feet of their yard.
And more mowing, too. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Is there anybody in the public who would like to address us at this time? Yes, ma'am. Would you come up and come to the podium and speak into the mic and tell us your name?
I just have a question, actually. My name is Maggie.
Could we have your name, please?
Maggie, Margaret.
Maggie. Okay, would you
Margaret
speak into the
Margaret.
mic?
Boom. Would the 6-foot, see the property on Harrison and 9th? The front door faces Harrison. It's a street. Would the fence be 6 foot tall from all the way up to where they meet at the corner there? I mean, is that, it's very difficult to turn onto that street as it is. You can't see. I'm just trying to figure out what a 6-foot fence would do to the vision when you're driving a car.
So that vision zone that you're looking at right there, as I understand, you can bring the 6 foot down to within 25 feet of your corner, and from there it has to transition down to 4 feet and be more than 50% transparent.
What does that mean, 50% transparent?
50% see-through.
See-through. So the people actually can see at that corner. I think, Patrick, am I saying that somewhat correctly?
Mm-hmm.
And we've always had that. That's always been, except now is all we're doing is essentially giving back your lawn so that that 6 foot portion can be put out against your sidewalk. Everything else, we've always had that transition zone.
Okay.
Okay?
Perhaps I'm not seeing it. Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Anyone else? At this time, then, I'd like to close the public hearing, and I call for a motion and a second. Would anybody like to try that?
Mr. Mayor,
John, go ahead, Jerry.
before I read this, we didn't have any other changes other than the modification I'm looking at, is that right?
I believe we were asked to accommodate a change to the definition of flag, and we'll bring that forward for second reading.
Okay. So I move to approve ordinance number 3, series of 2024 by title on first reading, incorporating the changes specified in addendum A, and set a second reading for August 5th, 2024.
Second?
Second, Kathy, thank you. Any questions on that motion or anything? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Maloney,
Aye.
Schmisher,
Aye.
Stein,
Aye.
Worthington,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. Now we're going into discussion for arbitrage and project yield restriction calculation report. And I tried to practice that all afternoon to get it correct, and I have no idea what you're talking about. So it is in your lap, Ryan.
Close enough, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually going to ask Tammy Nordyke, our finance director, to come up and present this topic. We also have a speaker from the consulting company as well, if there are questions.
Nicole, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
I got on.
All right, great. I would actually like to turn it over to Nicole to explain what arbitrage is all about and why we have to do this, and then open it up to questions.
Okay, could you give us your name again and what position you fill?
Yes, my name is Nicole McKenna, and I am the Vice President of Client Relations for Arbitrage Compliance Specialist. And Arbitrage Compliance Specialist is the firm that does the arbitrage work.
Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
So we did 2 reports. I'm going to cover them because they're separate. A lot of people kind of get them mixed in their minds. So I'm going to start with arbitrage. So arbitrage is required day 1, and it is required because there was a tax exempt bond issued. So every 5 years on maturity, you're required to do an arbitrage rebate report. The arbitrage rebate report, we concluded that there was no liability, and there's really nothing to be done until the next filing, which will be on the 10th year, which is actually 5 years from now. The IRS is a little confusing in that sense. But that won't be until March 28th, 2029. So we have a while for that one. The main reason Tammy brought me in today was the yield restriction. Yield restriction is extremely complicated, but the best way to think about it, overview, is it starts day 1 at the end of year 3. These rules were made in 1986, and the IRS expects the projects to be done in 3 years. Reality is that's not how the world works anymore. You guys do have a positive liability. That is a good thing. What it means in a broad sense is that you earned more than your allowable yield. You are allowed to earn up to 3.65%, and anything, 2.93%, and anything above that is going back to the IRS. So you guys earned the maximum amount you're allowed to earn, which applaud yourselves, that's amazing. We didn't used to see this back in the day. We used to see negative liabilities everywhere, which is kind of untapped potential. And you guys don't have that. You're allowed to use the money that you earned up until that yield. And then anything above the allowable yield does have to go back to the IRS. So we do have a liability currently of $51,000 and some change. And then we have something that's called an innocent failure. The way it works is you're required to complete this report within 60 days. If you think about it, that's 5 years of data and documents that have to be collected and then analyzed in 60 days. For your personal taxes, which is 1 year, you have 105 days. So they don't give us a lot of time to do that. And it was slightly late. It was a couple of days late. So there is a little bit of interest that's going to be tacked on there. But this isn't a bad thing. And unfortunately, it happens all the time. Like I said, they made these rules in the 80s when things were a lot different than they are today. So what that means is there's a letter that goes with it. And there are about 8 to 9 elements that are required to be included in that letter. We do have a template. We are not allowed to fill it out for you, but we do have a template that we can send, and then y'all can fill it out and send it along with the check. I covered a lot, so please let me know what questions y'all have.
It was interesting listening to you, and it really caught my attention when you said send along with the check. And
Yes.
that, so we were fortunate enough to have some very good people get good interest on the money that we had not spent that was expected to be spent in 3 years. And wasn't realistic. So we're giving back to the IRS a portion that we probably shouldn't have gotten, or we earned.
Yes, that you earned, and that portion has to go back. You get to keep, honestly, majority of it because your restricted yield was 2.9 and you earn 3.6. So you get to keep a big, big chunk of that. It's just unfortunately a small portion of it does have to go back to the IRS.
Okay. Any questions of council? John?
Is, Mr. Mayor, do you know, is it possible to pay this in pennies?
Please do.
That probably would be frowned on, I think, so no.
I heard they're low on pennies.
I don't want to add my 2 cents.
2 cents. I get it.
Any other questions? Is everybody, Amy? Yes, I see
Thanks.
your hand. Go, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Thank you. Vice President Nordike, or no, sorry, your name is not Tammy Nordike. You are
Nicole.
signed in for her. Nicole, you mentioned that we were a couple of days late on the yield restriction due to the amount of data that needed to be analyzed in the 60-day timeframe. Was that city staff being a couple of days late, or is that ACS? Or I understand that it's a relatively small amount of money, but just curious as to what happened there. Thanks.
That's a good question. So the way it works is we have the 60 days to analyze everything. So when we request the data, when you have a period that ends on the anniversary, so in this case it was March 28th, we have to wait for the bank and whatnot to actually create the statements. And then we had to find the documents from 2019. So it takes us about 7 to 10 business days to complete the report. It also was a mixture of just trying to get all this data at once. And this is not uncommon. This is not something that, Tammy did an amazing job getting me data. I was very impressed with the speed of which it happens. It's just the 60 days isn't usually a reasonable thing, especially when you have a liability that becomes positive, because that 60 days includes the check actually being written out and sent to the IRS. What I do recommend, knowing what we know, is I'm not worried about your arbitrage. I'm not. We are negative in a healthy position where with your debt service coming in, we really don't see an issue with it. Knowing what we know now and knowing that the money is not spent, there is about $2,602,000 left in the account as of March 28th, 2024. I recommend we do annuals. The reason why is it's required every 5 years, but to help ease the burden of collecting all the data and then for us to turn it around as quickly as possible and to keep the liability in the book and not tap into operating, we don't ever want to do that. I recommend we do annuals. So it would be required next 5 years. So that would be in 2029. But if we do it in annuals until the money is spent, we do have the option of then just waiting until the 5th year, turning around, writing the check, have everything done. It doesn't change your cost significantly. It does make us do a lot more work, but I'd rather personally know about it before it comes due. And then also, I think a really important thing to note is this liability is allowed to be paid out of your project proceeds. I think that's extremely important to know because, like I mentioned, we don't want to tap into operating.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any other questions, or Kathy, go ahead.
Just for clarification for me, this, what is it, the 46,000 or whatever, does that come, is that money that's in the account, so to speak, so it's not like you're taking other budget money out of it and just, it's already accounted for, you already have it ready, so in other words, it's easy to, quote unquote, easy to write a check for that?
We have,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Oh,
have,
sorry, Tammy.
we have the funds available. Council will need to determine if we are wanting to actually have it reduce what was in the project funds, which would mean that would be the 40-some thousand less that would be able to go towards a project, or come out of our normal operating budget. So if we decide to go the route of it coming out of the normal operating budget, when we come forward with the budget amendment, we will more than likely have an increase in our other fees and charges line item.
Did you have a clue that this was going to happen?
No.
So that
it's
would be another
unanticipated.
advantage to do it yearly, because you're going to have a better chance of not having a large amount at one time to sneak up on you.
Yes, we could accrue the liability on it. We could record it.
I would also like to note one more thing. With this liability, we accrued the interest through the 20th. With that being said, the way that the IRS works is there has to be like a manual check because they're old fashioned. And then you're going to send the 8038T, which we've already filled out for you guys. So you don't have to worry about it. And then that letter. And it has to be stamped in the mail on the 20th. And make sure you get a receipt.
That's the 20th of July.
Yes, that is
5 days.
technically Saturday, but I would get it in before then. But to get the physical receipt is one of the most important things because that is your proof that it is paid once it gets in the mail.
And the payment was actually approved in the list of bills this evening as well. We wanted to make sure that council was aware of that payment going out, and it was approved prior to us mailing anything.
Okay. Is there a question then? Do we take it out of operating, or we take it out of the proceeds from that bond? Or is that have been determined? Is that a question?
That is a question. We have not determined which way council would like to see it accounted for.
Okay.
I think the recommendation would be to take it out of the proceeds.
Yeah, that probably would make, because then if you had to pay yourself back, quote unquote, you pay it back in 5-year hence dollars, which we know are going to be worth less. Isn't that terrible? So, okay. Do we need to vote on that, or is that just what we're going to do?
I think as long as that's the direction of council, I don't know that we need a vote, but you do need to receive and file the reports.
Okay. And what's everybody's feeling? Are we okay with that? See a head shake, thumbs up. Amy? Oh, I see a thumb. It's not yellow. Very good. Okay, so that's the direction we would have you do. Okay, thank you. Do we need a motion then?
Yes, sir. We do need a motion to receive and file the report.
Okay, let's have a motion then. John?
So I move that we receive and file the arbitrage calculation March 2019 to March 2024.
Second?
I'll second.
Kathy, thank you. Hearing that, any discussion of that motion? Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Maloney?
Aye.
Schmisher?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Okay, well, that concludes our regular items. We're going to go ahead and excuse ourselves and we're going to move into executive session for discussions and negotiations having to do with the issue of, can I read this? Is that?
You can. You do need a motion to move to an executive session, sir.
I need a
Do
motion.
we need the script for that?
Oh.
Or we can just move to,
He just has to read, it's on the agenda.
Yeah, you just need to move to the language that's on the agenda.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move to an executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and to instruct negotiators regarding potential options for an agreement with the Canyon City Area Metropolitan Recreation and Park District for seeking approval of a new pool pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 in parentheses 4 in parentheses E.
I so move.
Move. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? If none, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Maloney?
Aye.
Schmisher?
Aye.
Stein?
Aye.
Worthington?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.